You're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Give me a full ballerina skirt and a hint of saloon, and I'm on board.
I have a hole in my stomach!
I can't go back.
Welcome to the She Became Visible podcast. I'm your host, Rene Steelman. This podcast is my story. It's your story. It's our story. It's all the stories of all the women who one day knew that it was time to remember who they were, who they are, and stand up and be seen.
Good morning. Thank you for joining me on She Became Visible today. I am so excited for my guest today. Let me tell you a little bit about her. And let me preface even this with stating that one of the reasons why I have my guest on today is because of the Restore conference that I went to a couple of weeks ago. Now, I know I've done a podcast about this, but when I started this year, 2025, once again, I really wanted to concentrate on health and fitness for women in my demographic, which is 60 and above, or even 50 and above, because it is so important. Health is wealth. It does not matter how much money you have or how privileged you are in this world if you do not have your health. And when I went to the Restore conference that was held by in Phoenix this year and organized by Julie Royce, it was even made more aware to me that women, especially in my demographic, because of the era that we were raised in, the 60s, the 70s, even the 80s, the culture told us who we were. Culture told us what our rules were and what our role was in the world. And if you happen to belong to an evangelical church or a very high demand religion, even more, you were told who you were. And the audience at the Restore conference that I went to was filled with women who had suffered abuse in their religion in one way or another. And they were, a lot of them, accompanied by a spouse or a partner. And there were a lot of fabulous men that spoke at this conference. It was amazing. And it breaks my heart that the LDS Church cannot follow this pattern of acknowledging the abuse that's going on. But what I saw and what I heard at this conference were women who were not only physically not healthy, but mentally destroyed. And I'm sure that the mental destruction is a big, huge part of why they are also physically not healthy. So you cannot have one without the other. You cannot be physically healthy but mentally destroyed. And you cannot be mentally destroyed and physically healthy. So even though I made this decision in January of this year to really concentrate on health and fitness for longevity for women in my demographic, I have learned very quickly, and especially through the Restore conference, that if you do not have mental health and mental peace, you will never have physical health. Once again, I want to talk with more women and I want to have more guests on my show about what we need to have mental health. And one of those needs can be filled with taking back your autonomy and taking back your self-awareness and your self-esteem as far as knowing who you are. So that is really what has driven the last couple of podcasts that I've done. And I'm sure if any of you watched my first few podcasts in January, you were thinking, I thought she was going to talk about health and fitness. What is she doing? She's back on that Mormon bandwagon. What's going on here? And it's not a Mormon bandwagon. It's a woman bandwagon. And unfortunately, the most hurt women that I see are women that have come from fundamental religions, evangelical, Mormonism, Christian, and whatnot. So my guest today is a TikTok fabulous phenomenon. She has a TikTok channel called all those opposed. And many of you, if you see that, you're like, all those opposed? What does that have to do? Unless you're a Mormon, you don't understand even the name of her TikTok channel. And so let me give you a little example of her work on TikTok.
Secret sauce behind all their startups.
Who is Conor McGregor?
Bucked up local company that brought him to the BYU game. They were also at the Jazz game.
A UFC superstar came to a BYU basketball game the other day, was brought there by the owners of Bucked Up, which I think is kind of funny. I just love it when people are willing to go a little bit out on the edge. I knew Bucked Up started in Utah County, and I kind of just assumed it wasn't like LDS folk, because I was taught as a Mormon to avoid all appearance of evil. And for sure the F word was the worstest of all words, except for using the Lord's name in vain. So to do a play on words like that, Bucked Up, I just went on a big, huge tangent. So back to the point of the story, it's gonna be so weird. The world's probably like, why in the heck is he at BYU with a bunch of Mormons? How does that connect? And I was thinking of MLMs or startups and things. And there has to be some sort of proof or something about how many startups that do really well are from Utah. And if you could do per capita religion-wise startups in relationship to any other evangelical startup or a Jewish startup, well, they might win. But, Mormons, they do well. They do really well in the startup entrepreneurial world. And I think it's awesome. But I just realized their superpower, because I used to have it too. When you believe that you're the deity, the God of everything is on your side and wants to grow the church. And so if that God helps you make a whole crap ton of money, and you're going to be paying 10% to the church, which is going to help grow the church. It's also going to this business. Is it going to expand Mormonism to people like Conor McGregor? Who wouldn't just push through the hard stuff?
Okay, is that not fabulous? That's what I'm talking about. So let me bring on my guest today. Her name is Jenn Neelsen. This is her TikToks. She's very herself. She's very honest. It's just her. And that's what I love about it. And of course, there's always going to be this Mormon undertone, because like Jenn, that's our tribe. That's where we came from. And I love what she said is, well, when I was a Mormon, I was taught, and we're going to talk about that. So let me bring Jenn on. Hello.
Hey, Rene. Hello. I'm so happy to be here. Please excuse my voice. I just always have this issue, and I don't know what it is. I've gone to the doctors, all the things, but I have to cough a lot. So forgive me.
All right. Well, it sounds better than RFK Jr., so you're doing good.
I'm getting close, though, sometimes. I know.
So I love that particular TikTok. You got a lot of views on that TikTok. And what's funny is, you know how they say, if you buy a red Toyota for the next 3 days, you're going to see nothing but red Toyotas, right? So yeah. I hadn't heard of Colin McGregor, right? But I'm watching D-Vace's Mormon News Roundup from last week, and he brings up Conor McGregor. And I'm like, Conor McGregor, I haven't seen any of that. So I looked him up, and we could have a 4-hour podcast right now. Not only, like you say, not only can we talk about the MLMs, startup companies in Utah that are LDS based. I mean, New Skin, Unique, doTERRA. I mean, it just goes on and on. And number one, we all know that Utah gives them a huge tax break, which is one of the reasons why people flood to Utah for their MLMs and their startup companies. But there's also this freaky, weird Mormon obsession with notoriety and fame. And so they bring in Conor McGregor to go to this BYU game because he's this famous Irish, like you say, UFC, martial arts. I can't even remember, but he's Irish and he's like a hero. And so they're like, famous, money. Yes, yeah. Bring him on. Well, he's also been, accused of sexual assault. He also has a lot of sexual misconduct on his record, but the church doesn't care about that. And it's just like, oh, why? Why are we the only ones that see this? Why aren't there good, faithful, obedient LDS people in Utah going, why did you bring those social influencers to the temple opening ceremony? They're not Mormon and they have a horrible channel, and oh, they're famous. They're famous and they're rich. That's all you need. Anyway, so that was one of your fabulous things. But tell everybody a little bit of who you are and how you got started on TikTok.
Okay. Like you said, I am completely myself all the time. I wish I knew how to be anything else because that might be really fun. But I just say what I say and whatever. And I've always been that way. Like as a member, as a leader, as all the things in church, I was naive enough to just what came to my mind. I thought I was being inspired and things. I just have always just spoken my mind. So I started TikTok. It goes so fast now. It maybe it's been almost 3 years. And I started it because I was so locked in my bedroom and had no one to talk to about my faith crisis. And I just listened and consumed so much. And it was just filling up in me. I just had to have a place to say it, to just be able to just speak what my thoughts, even just dumb little things like when I'm watching Ward Radio and they talk about Conor McGregor coming on or being at BYU, like I want to be able to talk about how stupid that is and how like they have such blinders and like on, with patriarchy and everything, like they don't even see what they're doing. So I just wanted a place to have a voice, and I really don't want to hurt my family, meaning my brothers and sisters, my parents. And so I've been careful, and they might say different, to not say things online or social media that would embarrass them or cause them harm. TikTok was totally new to me. I had never, my kids just did the dumb dances and stuff, so I knew of it. It was new to me. And it was twofold. I wanted a place to be able to speak up and share, because also my family that also left the church with me, they only want to hear so much. They never probably loved it or were as entrenched in it as I was. And so when I left, they were like, hallelujah, and so they want to just move on. Where me, I had 44 years of like deep indoctrination, a very childlike level of a development, very naive, very literal. Like I had so many things that I needed to grow from, and I needed to talk it out. I went to TikTok. Oh, that was my other thing, is that I was terrified of being seen. I knew that was holding me back. And it was one of those things I was just like, practice makes perfect. I guess turning it on the first couple of times was really, really, really scary. But I realized I didn't die. Maybe no one was going to see it. Maybe lots of people would see it. But so it was also just doing something for me that kind of that took a risk, in being seen. And also caring, like, I'm very sensitive, I have ADHD, and I guess I didn't realize all the things that meant, but I am really a sensitive person. And so it was like knowing that I'm going to get some backlash. I might be made fun of. No one might see it, like all the things, and that might hurt, but I did it anyway. So that's why I got on TikTok. I also sent an email to my family telling them, without being like overt about it, I just said, I want you all to know that I'm going to start a TikTok channel, and I'm warning you, yourselves, and for you to warn like your children maybe, and go block it, because I'm not going to hold back there. That I need a place to be able to work out all of my stuff. And so that's the platform I've chosen. And I've tried to be thoughtful in every other place and spare feelings and that, but I need this space. And so the funny thing is I didn't hear back from any of them. Like, I just thought that was so crazy, because it wasn't a scary thing. Really, I was like trying to protect, but even that got crickets, And I'm just like, that's so strange to me. But it tells you how much I had no way to communicate it or share it or talk through these things with anybody else.
Your siblings are younger than you because you're the oldest in the family. So they should have been very familiar with TikTok. And I know you said your family, so you're talking about your husband and your 3 daughters, correct? They all left the church with you?
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes, I didn't clarify that. Yeah.
Okay, but mom and dad and siblings are all still in?
Yeah, I was the first in our family.
Oh, yeah. And the other
Aunts,
siblings, the
uncles.
other 4, are they still in?
The 5, they are.
Okay, so you would think that they're younger than you, so they're familiar with what TikTok is. You would think there would be some response from a brother or a sister. I mean, I could see mom and dad going, I don't even know what TikTok is. What is she talking
Yeah,
about? Whatever.
that's true.
But
Yeah.
you would think that one of the younger brothers and sisters would be like, what? You're going to start dancing? What are you doing? You know, because like you say, in the very beginning, I don't think it was as refined as it is now, and it's not as teaching as it is now. But I can't believe that they didn't respond, even just to say, thanks for letting us know. The end.
That's kind of what I thought. Like, thanks for the heads up. Or maybe
Yeah.
like if they didn't know much about it, like, well, how do I do that? How could I make sure my kids don't find it?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
just engaging like a little bit more, even just for further protection for themselves and their kids. Like, I just thought it
Yeah.
was so strange.
But you know what? Strange and telling at the same time, because when the indoctrination that we're all given to not read, not to, you know, the prophet comes out, don't listen to anybody that doesn't believe, you could see where they were probably frozen in their belief in their faith in the church, that they couldn't even respond to an email from their sister because that might not be prophet approved. It might be scary. It might be opening up a window for them to say, well, what are you going to talk about? And then that's scary. So nothing.
Like, they knew I was going to be talking about leaving the church.
Yeah.
You know, I did. They knew only probably from my mom or something, because I didn't tell anybody. I've talked to 2 of my siblings about it later, but there's siblings that we've never even acknowledged that I and my whole
Even though
family are
you've
out of the
left the
church.
church. Yeah.
Yeah.
They just like, nope, it doesn't exist.
Yeah,
So
right.
have you gotten together as a family since
Oh,
you've left the
yes.
church? And it's like nothing.
Yes.
Hey, Jen,
Yep.
how you doing? What's great? Yeah, nothing.
Yeah. And in some ways,
Wow.
I think it's just shocking to me. I
Yeah,
still am
that's
shocked
true.
by things, you know, but
Yeah.
I was in some really I went through all the phases, you know, and I
Yeah.
don't know that I maybe would have addressed things very well, you know, so
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
not talking about it for all those years, because now I'm at 6
Yeah.
and I am just like it was in December, I kind of had a weird spiritual thing happen. And I finally like am at equilibrium with it all.
Oh,
Something just finally clicked. But until then, I mean, I'm still like super interested in Mormonism, studying
right.
it and all the things.
Yes.
But the anger and the angst and the pain and personally has kind of subsided, and I can kind of see just, well, this is where I was brought up, and these are the circumstances, and this is what happened.
That was kind of the message that I was giving in January, when I was like, you know what? I'm through. It's like the Goliath and the David thing. I'm not going to fight the church anymore. I really want to just move on. Can we just talk about? Can we just talk about protein levels and, you know, or something, anything else? You know,
Yes.
have you seen that Canadian comedy sketch that they do on TikTok? It's so funny, but unfortunately, that day the church is just constantly. It's like a beautiful all-you-can-eat buffet of crazy crap that's
Yeah.
going on, that it's so hard to just walk away. I have so much respect for John Larson. I don't know if you
Oh,
ever,
yes. I
you know,
love
I
John
mean,
Larson.
and when John Dehlin brought him back, I was like, oh, good, because I loved he was part of my deconstruction, listening to all of his stuff, and he's so knowledgeable, but
And
he's just
passionate.
disappeared. Yeah, but he's just disappeared. He's got a farm, he's got a job, he's got a life. He's like, I don't want to keep doing this, and I thought I could do that. But dang got it. It's like every day, especially now that the world has jumped on with Hulu and Netflix and
Right.
all of the, you know, TV shows, that kind of keeps things in the news. But what I find interesting, Jen, and tell me if you now where you're at, because you're not in Utah, what's the LDS population around you? I mean, you don't live where there's an LDS church on every corner, right?
I mean, no, but there's like, I can walk to one 2 minutes away. Neighbors, I only know because I know they're Mormon, like they're a little bit more distant. I don't have any
Okay.
in our couple streets here. There's 3 stakes in this area, which I think is a decent amount, right? With 12
Yeah.
units pretty much
Yeah.
in each. So, I mean, I think people are aware of Mormons, but it's definitely a dominant Catholic area.
Okay. Okay. First of all, when you were adopted, did they go through church social services to that adoption program? Okay, so you were so it was an LDS girl that gave you up for adoption.
No,
It wasn't. How did she find out about church services?
Which is so funny because I've actually found her since. Like
Okay,
it
that's a whole.
happened
Yeah,
about the
It's gonna be
same
a
time.
4-hour podcast.
Yeah,
Okay.
it happened at around the same time as my faith crisis. Like, so I just had like so much. It was crazy. I think what it was is her doctor was LDS and
Of
said,
course.
well, I know some really good people. That's the other thing I think is strange because I've talked to her. It was definitely like, like he was coming off like he personally knew a couple that would be wonderful and are so wanting a child. He never knew my parents. He just knew he was going to go through LDS social services and trusted that any parents that, you know what I'm saying? It was all this
Yeah.
idea of like, oh, you could never go wrong with a Mormon couple.
Yes.
Fortunately, it didn't.
That is a perfect example of last week on my podcast. I was talking about the predators that have been arrested by Floodlit. And I know you did a TikTok on Floodlit, but one of the ones that was recently put on Floodlit was a doctor in Oregon that actually was my son's doctor. And when I found out that he had been accused of over 70 instances of SA, I was like, that little redheaded, dumpy, doughy man who I just thought was just this cute little Mormon doctor, was serving on the High Council. Just, I mean, not attractive in any way. How the crap did he, do, and then you hear the story and it was just, mind blowing. But the exact same reason I took my son to him and all these women went to him, he's a Mormon. He's on the High Council. What could go wrong? He has a temple recommend. Therefore, he is honest in all his dealings. He loves God. He follows all the commandments. He follows the word of wisdom. Ta-da! And so that's what you think. And here's another example. I have acquaintances with 3 or 4 couples that adopted through church social services. And there's only one that is actually intelligent, integrity, upstanding, kind, loving people. The other couples were loony and they got babies through social services. Marriages have dissolved, all kinds of stuff. So this whole idea that you're going to get infallible, perfect little angel people if they're temple recommend. Amazing. Okay, so she's like, oh, that sounds good. So how old was she, your mom?
She was actually 18. So I'm so grateful. I mean, now that I've met her and her life, so grateful that my parents followed the promptings that they had. They moved to Texas from Utah with the intentions, knowing that they had a better chance of being able to adopt. Yeah.
Really? Because there were too many LDS couples in Utah. They were sucking up all the babies.
And my mother, my aunt also moved down there because she heard it would be easier. And they adopted 2, actually just like us. I'm the eldest, and then my younger brother, just younger than me. So my mom got a girl and a boy, and my aunt got a girl and a boy too. And they both ended up having, then all of a sudden, they're fertile. Their bodies start clicking and working, and they had big families.
Isn't that amazing? You hear that story? Lets you know how connected our mind body is, and the whole, every little electronic enzyme, cellular, everything is so connected with what we're doing on the outside. Wow, it's so amazing. That's the problem, because there is so much good that's done. And you did have a happier ever after in that situation. So it's hard to badmouth, so many times that when people say, well, why don't you look at the good that's done in the church? I love and admire so many of the people that have either stayed in the church or have gone Christian after they leave the church, because they don't want to bring down the church. They want to make it better. They're trying to improve the system. And I admire those people. I wasn't able to do that, but
they grew up a lot faster than I did through the whole process of like adult development. It took me a lot longer to get to that point.
You know what though? I think as you and I have our ADHD in common, and one of the things I heard yesterday was people with ADHD have a real right or wrong. And I am very sensitive to injustice.
I was just thinking that we got that from the church, our black and white thinking. But you're just confirming that it's on top. We also had this just way our mind worked that was that way. So it makes more sense of how absolutely literal and right and wrong, black and white my world was. It still probably would have been even without Mormonism, just because of our ADHD. But it was something that added just that next level of sensitivities.
So you mentioned that in 2019, you're still active, you're still believing, you're devoted, and you listened to a conference talk by the prophet, Russell Nelson, and he talks about the new Come Follow Me program. And what was it about that led you to the CES letters?
That is so funny. I don't know. It wasn't about Come Follow Me. It was, the talk is just titled Come Follow Me. I know now, looking back, I had no idea where I was in my faith journey. I just thought I was stronger individually. I was finding autonomy because I read every Brene Brown book. I was learning about Buddhism, and I was like growing, but I didn't realize how it was affecting all of that stuff. So, but
let me just interrupt for just a second.
Yeah.
How old were you?
I was 44.
When this happened? Okay, see, so biologically, your hormones and everything else is also changing, and your brain is getting, your estrogen levels are dropping, and this whole nurturing, I'm going to love everybody, kumbaya, is changing. And you know how you hear, that's the big thing, where you hear women say, at 20, I did this, at 30, I did this, at 40, I was like, oh yeah, hold my beer. And at 50, you're like, you're like, F you, I'm doing whatever I'm going to do. So
I turned 50 this year. Yay!
Yes. So it is amazing. Biologically, it's like women, they really can't even wake up. I have admiration for women in their 30s that do, but just biologically, we're not there yet. But like you say, you still have you're still you. You probably did the same thing that I did, where they would say things like, I remember, you're too young for this, but I remember sitting in the church when Gordon B. Hinckley told the women that one pair of earrings, that's it. And we all went home and took out our second piercings and, stopped wearing jeans to church.
I think I was in the hospital having a baby. My mother-in-law told me that he had said that. So it would have been around, I don't know, early 2000s. And I just remember thinking, yeah, like, really? I just thought that was so weird. And I remember how proud everyone was around me of taking it out. And like the virtue signaling that did. Like, do you know what I mean? It was just a way to be able to outwardly show, I'm so righteous, I will sacrifice this. Where the crazy thing is, I didn't have a second piercing because I followed the first rule about like your body's a temple and you don't do that. I was
like, I can't even show you how valiant I am, darn it.
Exactly.
Okay, so go back to your talk. So you're here this conference talk.
So, but I do recognize too, I would talk with my husband. I had gotten down to, with my testimony, I was very heavy on Jesus. Mostly, I think, because as I was finding things in church that I'm like, I don't know that feels right to me. And like starting to trust kind of myself. I never in a million years would have thought everything was going to crash. I just thought, oh, of course, people aren't perfect. Things go haywire. And so maybe I shouldn't take it all wholesale. So like when I would teach a class and it was something about the milk strippings and marsh or whatever. And I was like, I don't know about that. I just doubled down on Jesus. And I was like, all that matters is, and I told my kids, I think that's what it was. I was so overwhelmed with the gospel and so much to be taught, to teach my children. And I knew that my one whole job was to get my kids back to a Heavenly Father. Yeah. That was my job. And so whenever I would get overwhelmed in life with anything, I could always come back to that place of like, I know who I am. I'm a child of God. Heavenly Father has like gifted me with my children because he trusts that I have what is needed to direct them back and get them back to Heavenly Father. Anything that was getting in the way of that, I could just kind of push it away because I'm like, Jesus Christ and repentance is the way back to God. I could see that was at the foundation, but mostly because I studied my butt off. Like I loved studying and researching and all of that. And I would always come back to, okay, well, it's even that scripture in Nephi about after all we can do. I was teaching in Relief Society, in Stake Relief Society, assigned by the stake president to specifically teach the women about Christ and reliance on Christ. Because I would teach that all we can do is continually turn back on Christ and his gift, because we are human and we will mess up every single day. So get over the fact that you messed up, quit beating yourself up, and trust that he knows you. He is already aware. So turn it over. So I was very grace heavy in my testimony. I remember even over the pulpit one time, I'm getting so off track, sorry. Squirrel.
No, you're not.
I remember getting up and bearing my testimony because I had been teaching a class mostly of boys. It was the oldest group in primary. And there was a couple of them that were making fun of the other kid because he didn't know like all the prophets in the scriptures, or he didn't know exactly how the story went or whatever. And I had talked to them, but I just felt so heavy on me. Like, I just felt that was wrong. And you're missing the whole freaking point, and these other boys are thinking they're so cool because their parents teach it differently, or put the emphasis on knowing, the story in the Book of Mormon. And I remember bearing my testimony, telling it to everyone. I was talking to the kids again, reaffirming the Book of Mormon doesn't matter all that much. It's the message of the Book of Mormon that matters. We don't need to know when and what and who and how, but ultimately that Jesus Christ is what it's pointing to. And so don't get upset. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't let that drag you down. It doesn't matter. It's all about Jesus. I probably had my leaders worried, but I didn't feel that I was breaking any rules or saying anything wrong. I thought I was speaking absolute truth. Like, it felt so genuine and right to me.
This was before, or was this the introduction when you heard that talk was this the introduction to Jesus that Russell Neelsen has brought into the church, where it's like, all right, we can't do this, peculiar people thing. It's not working in the 21st century. So we're going to have to, follow the Christians and do Jesus. Was this was that your Jesus moment? Because
no, Russell was late to that party with me.
Okay.
Because when he brought that about, it was wasn't it with the youth? Because they came to my house to watch the youth fireside, where he was talking about using the name of the church, like to not use Mormonism, and that we needed to not leave Jesus out, that we needed to use his name, the full name of the church. And I was like, that totally makes sense to me. I was like, hallelujah.
That confirmed that what you were doing was inspired.
Pretty much. It definitely, like, pat on the back. I just felt like it wasn't even a pat on the back. I just really believed God and I were that connected. Like, I trusted my gut, and I believed the Lord was guiding my gut. We were connected. And so, give the glory to God. But no, that was in 18, I believe. And this happened, it was spring of 2019.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And the Come Follow Me talk, basically, he mocks love. And I had come to realize, like, at the core is love. I mean, God is love. God, like, love, it's like, it's a big deal. And he mocked how people, all those songs, how people say that love is enough. All you need is love. And he's just like, and I was letting that go a little bit, but it bothered me. I'm trying to remember, there were like 4 points. How a lot of times they'll talk about something and they say something that's actually cutting and pretty ugly, but
like the
laughs.
myopic comment he made about his granddaughter or whatever, and that was so offensive.
Yes, but they all laugh. Now I recognize it's just uncomfortable laughter, and that's always been something that drives me crazy. Like, my mom is one of these, and I love my mom. It's just her nature. If it's uncomfortable, it's a giggle. Or she'll say something that's kind of shocking, and she follows it with a laugh. And I'm always just like, I never laugh with her, because I'm like, that makes no sense. Those things don't work. Anyways, so the mocking laughter, reaffirming a story they told about a friend that had asked if he could baptize him after he dies so that he could go to heaven. And he says, like, I mean, I don't want to speak for God, but I mean, and then he goes on to totally judge his friend and make fun of that, like how he missed out on his chance. To me, that also went against something I'd always believed. I believed that God gave us all the chances we needed to gain all the understanding so that we could clearly and confidently come to him. It wasn't like a gotcha, like, you're going to get these chances, but they're going to be a little sneaky and you're going to miss it, and then it's over for you. Like, I really believed, like, people could pass it up here on this earth, but I believed that everyone will get the chance, and the chance has to be fair and equal for all, right? So when he said that, and he was basically saying his friend was damned, I didn't believe it was so true story, because nobody talks about their true friends like that. It was so simplistic that I'm like, it left out it was just ugly. And then hearing everyone laugh about it, I just realized that either God was speaking to him and he was right, and I had veered off a path somewhere, or I was right and the prophet of God was wrong. And so it came to a very binary, like black and white, either or. There was zero nuance in that, but that's how my brain. And I just went in my room and started just writing. It was frantic. I don't know. That's when I mentally just my brain couldn't anymore.
So,
And I
so
ended up,
that's what led you to the CES letters, because you're like, I gotta find out more
yeah.
about how this church works.
Yeah, it was that day and the next day. But it wasn't the CES letter. I still have yet. I've never read it. But it's because I
Okay.
don't want to believe anyone ever again. I don't want anyone else to feed me
Just
information.
yes. I read the CES letters and I remember going, whatever. The Book of Mormon is true. Joseph Smith was still a prophet. Steel bows, wood, the horses, whatever,
Yeah.
oats, sheep, whatever. That did not matter to me because, in the end, Joseph Smith is still the prophet. And then I read No Man Knows My History. And I'm like, or he was a con man. So, and where was your husband? Were you talking to him about this?
No.
No, you're like, okay, I'm gonna see, we keep it to ourselves because we're just not sure and it's not safe.
Well, and I was the spiritual person in our family. My husband
Okay.
didn't really like to get deep. He was willing, but afterwards I figured out he was just a cultural Mormon. He did all the things because that's what he was told to do. That's what his people do. It was never a
Yeah.
conviction with God or like a spiritual
Yeah.
thing. And he loved me, so he did it with me.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be sure, because I knew I had been taught that if you're in contradiction with God's prophet or the church, that you need to figure out where you went wrong. So I actually went to the gospel topic essays, which I had heard
That's what
about,
it was. Yes.
but I just always assumed because I did so much study that they were kind of like the Reader's Digest version of like some gospel issues. I just never thought I needed to read them. So at this point, I'm like, maybe they have something new that I'm not aware of. The first one, of course, to me, being the way I am, I'm like, well, I'm just going to go to the very beginning because, start at the very beginning. I just was like, that's what the foundational part of it, right? The story. That's where the missionaries always start discussions, is about the prophet Joseph Smith and the beginning of the church. And so I'm like, let's just start at the beginning and I'll figure out what's going on here. And so I went to the first vision gospel topic essay first, which talked about the different versions, which I know somewhere back listening to some things, I knew there were different versions, but in my head I had just thought different stories from that had heard it from Joseph, or you know what I mean. I just never bothered me. I started reading the apologetics in the essay, and I only got a couple paragraphs in and I could just hear all of the apologetics because I'd been doing apologetics for so long. You know what I mean? I could just hear, oh, they're just walking me through it so that I see and read what they want me to see. And so I was like, I'm just going to read the actual document. So I went and I read that 1832 First Vision account, which I had never read before. And it was so beautiful, so sweet, so short and sweet. And he talked about the thing, I'm going to get like emotional because it mattered so much to me, but I never had heard ever that Joseph went to God for forgiveness of sin, which was my top value in the church and what I believed what mattered in the gospel and was the way back to God. So to find out that like that part was left out, the most important part was just, I'm like, okay. Yeah, I read that through maybe 3 or 4 times, and I could see 4 different that were not only left out, but were actually in opposition to the story as I had been told. That one, along with Joseph saying before he went that he had already come to the realization himself that all of the churches had gone astray. And so that's why he went to God for forgiveness of sin, because he didn't believe anyone else around him could offer him that they weren't connected with heaven. So then I'm like, oh, you mean God didn't tell him they were all wrong? Joseph just already knew that, or had come to that realization. How the church had never let me know that. Like, because of what we're talking about, I will just stop now and just say that Mormon God just was obliterated for me. Like in that moment, it was so fast because I'm like, he created a God in his own image, like literally created a human God. He created a limited, smaller box God and then told us we could be a God. What could be more enticing than that to sell a story, right? Or a religion. And so I could just see so that exploded and went like into a huge God for maybe a day. I was like, oh my gosh, God is so huge. I was shook that I had this God in such a small little box, but I also knew this huge source God. I wasn't connected to that one. I knew this other little man God.
Yeah.
And so it was beautiful and expansive. And then it just kind of went, God was crashed and burned for me. So it wasn't only Mormonism. It was Mormonism and God, that all of it just
Yeah.
was gone.
Wow.
How
So
did we get there?
this deep faith that you had in Jesus, that you were fighting for even before Russell Nelson took on the new religion, was also crashed with that revelation of the 4 versions of the first vision. And
I
I
guess
love the way you described that, as he took a huge God and put him into a little Joseph box. And I love that description. I don't know whether this is an ADHD thing or just a personality trait, that it only took a day. I think that's why I am so confused at people that hear stuff and hear stuff and hear stuff, and they read stuff and they read stuff, and they're like, I still believe, I still believe, I still believe. Because it was the same for me. It was like a light switch, like the Book of Mormon play. It was like a light switch. I was like, oh, this is all a money grab con job. And it was formulated by a con man who may have started, like many con men do. They start out as good people. They start out with good intentions, but the money and the power takes over, and the influence from outside people take over, and it became a fraud. So once I saw that, I could never go back. Like I say in my opening, I can't go back. When did your husband jump on board with us? And where were your girls at this time? Yeah, I'm just assuming with your activity and also being a woman, that your girls were just going along with mom. Yeah.
they were teenagers. Yeah, they were
Okay.
teenagers. But I want to say first, it's so nice talking to someone else that's been through this, that also has ADHD and is aware of it and can actually like kind of work that out. Because I think that one of the reasons why we can do it so fast is because, at least for me, this is actually a phenomenon that hurts my brain, but I think you've nailed it. I think it's just my ADHD. I didn't ever look and project the what might happen if. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was never a part of the like, how should I navigate this or what? All I knew is that everything that I had ever held as true and good was not. And
Yeah.
nobody told me about that. They actually told me the opposite. Like it was just, so I just had to act with the information I had in the moment without thinking of all that could come of that. I didn't think about, well, then what does happen after we die? Or did it?
Yeah.
None of those questions. I was in the
Yeah.
moment with this new information, and I just started acting on that information. Where now I look back at other people, I'm like, how did they get to stay? How did they know that's an option? How did they, because that never even crossed my mind. But now I understand more complex thinkers, with like what less black and white absolutes probably does play around with different options and different outcomes and plays out like, well, this or this. I don't. I'm in the moment
Yeah.
and I react in the moment. And as silly as that might be, I mean, I'm trying now that I'm aware of that to be different, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it makes more sense of why I reacted the way I did. Because I was really upset with
Yeah.
myself the way I reacted for a long time. I'm like, there's people that stay. That's an option. And you hear people say, oh, but prophecy and all this stuff. I never really believed that. And now you're just using it as an excuse for not having integrity. That's how I feel sometimes.
No.
Like,
No, that's so true. And you're so right. There is so much if you combine impulse control, which is an ADHD problem, with black and white thinking. Did you think about what the consequences would be if you did that? You're like, no, I just knew that I had to do this, and I'm out of here, Okay, so
So you were asking me about Brian, my
yeah, I'm
husband.
asking about your husband because
Sorry, is that his name?
at one point, did you actually resign your membership? Have you taken your records off the church? You haven't done that
No,
yet.
strictly just because I know then I've heard that it gets back to my mom and I just don't want to break her
Oh,
heart. And it doesn't,
yeah.
I don't think it means anything other than
No.
I also don't believe they probably take our name or our number away,
Yeah.
from the membership. So
Well,
I'm
let
like,
me tell you something. I just, for the fun of it, because I was reading something about pathways, and I was like, oh, all right, let's just see how this works. So I get on the LDS tools and I type in my name on the thing, and I put in my all my information that's saved. So it had my records number on there. Boop, this little thing comes back. Yeah, that's not going to work. Basically, it was like your records are not on the church anymore. You can't do pathway unless you're a member of the church. And I was like, okay. So it's, I mean, but like you say, they're there, but it's been marked. It's, been signaled. Because in case I come back, they can just flip that little switch again and make everything back again. But
Yeah.
interesting. Okay. So I only did it because I remember last year, my brother-in-law said to my husband, Rene better watch it. I mean, the things that she's saying, she could get in big trouble with the church. And my husband goes, oh yeah, she's already left. Because my big thing was I had been putting up with the patriarchal crap for so long. I was never going to let a man tell me whether I could be in the church or not in the church. That was never going to be left to anybody else. It was a piece of cake to walk to the bank, and they're all notaries, right? So you walk to the bank, they put the little stamp on, put it in the mail, and like, I'm done. And so that was my thing. It was more of a oppositional disorder that I have. It's like, oh no, you are not going to tell me what to do.
Well, and I love that for you because it worked for you. That was an empowering thing for you. I remember too why I didn't at the beginning. It wasn't because of my mom. I didn't know she'd find out. It was because I wanted to get excommunicated. I wanted to have them kick me out and let my mom know I didn't take myself out. They kicked me out of the church, That's what I wanted. That was my vindictive, come get it.
There you go. That's So in your growing up experience, what was your relationship with bishops or priesthood authority? Would you qualify yourself in the category that, as I mentioned, I'd gone to the Restore conference where these women had suffered clergy abuse and what Julie Royce likes to call church hurt? Had you ever experienced any kind of clergy abuse or church hurt or anything like that?
No. I had good bishops, and I also think I just benefited. I just guess I was lucky. Yeah, I just had good guys around me. I never really knew what patriarchy was. I didn't really see it. And I would have fought tooth and nail saying it wasn't really a thing because I never, as a woman, felt or recognized how I was being affected by it at all. Like even in the temple when we had to bow and say that we would follow our husband's counsel as he hearkened to God. Well, I knew that Heavenly Father knew that my husband's not going to him asking questions. I knew that he talks directly to me. So there were some things that it wasn't a thing. I never felt abused, or probably until I talked to my stake president. We went to lunch after I was having my crisis, and we were talking, and he's a really cool guy, and he's very intelligent, and he's really charismatic and really fun and really great. And we were talking, and I was open, and I found out he's a relative of Juanita Brooks, and I was fangirling about his great-great-great-grandma or whatever. And he's like, well, just so you know, she never left. And I'm like, okay. But she spoke up, and she said her thing, and I just think that's really cool. The first time I ever saw a man get kind of with me was at that lunch when he finally realized all my BS isn't gonna work, and he kind of changed his demeanor completely, and we wrapped up really quick. And that's the first time I felt like, it wasn't working. Like once he couldn't just appease me or change my mind, he just wanted me to go away. And I don't know if that's patriarchy, but it was just like, oh, that's how that goes. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think for me, the patriarchy was so much a part of my culture. I mean, the year I got married, 1974, was the year that women were able to open up a checking account. So culturally, I was raised to, just smile and be nice and sure, and so I didn't see a difference between what the world was doing and what the church was doing. I just took it as that's what men do. But I did know when men were just being jerky men and when there were good men, because actually one of the stake presidents, when we lived in Oregon, my husband was in the High Council, and the stake president was he was the regional church social services guy, the kindest, most loving man in the world, just so kind and so wonderful. And then, we had a stake president that was a jerk. And, I mean, so I just saw it as men's fallibility and just went along with culturally what I was taught. But I recognized when things were like, you're just really a mean, egotistical jerk. But I didn't look at that as because A, you're a doctor, so that means you already have a God complex, and B, you've been given this authority from God, which just doubles down on all that, So I was able to look at it culturally more than religiously. But we did, like you say, you and I seemed to have the same thing where I would listen to talks or I would hear conference talks. And I remember going, ooh, yikes. I don't know about that. But then I got other things to do. I got kids to take care of. Just go whatever. And so your husband hasn't taken his name off the records either?
No. And his family lives here. Well, his parents live here locally. So he's actually taken a lot more of a
He's
brunt,
getting
like
more family stuff.
from his family, than I am, because mine's mostly in Utah. So I have that distance, and his are here. And we were like, so their egos were hit too. People know them well, and they knew us well. And when we left, I'm sure that was humiliating, embarrassing. I don't know, because they don't talk about it with us. It's affected his relationships a lot more. So that's sad. But I told
What
my
about your
husband,
girls? Because your girls are grown.
a couple are still here, and they have worked out keeping a relationship there and going to lunch and still having that relationship, because at a point it got cut off for me because I needed to talk. It's kind of a long story, but like, I will be social, I will be polite, I will go along and get along. But as for me putting myself, being open, it's just not gonna. I had to, for my own protection, shut that
Right.
down. They didn't see her as much, so they have their relationship with her, and it's
So they have
fine.
a grandma and grandpa. They have a
They do.
relationship with grandma and
They do.
grandpa and cousins and things
Yeah.
like that. They're
It's
not afraid. There's no cousins that are like, we don't really want you hanging out with Mary Beth and Julie. I'm making up those names because we're afraid that there might be information, distributed that would cause our kids to question.
most of their cousins on this side live in Texas, so they're away. But the few that are here, just recently, they've talked with my brother-in-law. Well, it's my sister-in-law. She's a therapist. She's just a lot more aware of things. I think we don't talk about it, but I know she
Yeah.
talked to one of my daughters that was having some hard times, not associated with church. But she even told her, just so you know, I don't agree with everything. And I think you're a good person. And I know you are a good person. It doesn't matter if you're in the church or not. They've started hanging out with their kids more. And like, so the only cousins that are here have really cool parents
Oh,
who
that's so
are able
great.
to like, so I'm grateful for that. So they haven't
Yeah.
had backlash
Yeah.
there or anything, but like they've been defriended or whatever with cousins sometimes here and there, like through social media. But I think it's okay.
Well, and especially right now, there's so much turmoil in the world politically that you could be a strong, active member of the church, but be a Democrat, and you'd be in
Yeah.
trouble with your family. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's so funny because I have run into maybe 3 or 4 couples in the church because my husband is still a member of the church. In fact, he's at church right now. And I still have relationships with some people that are in the ward. And it's just amazing to me how the assumption is, well, you're an active member of the church, so obviously you voted Republican. And aren't you just astonished at, well, I had a lady say to me the other day, have you lost friends because of your political choice? And I was like, okay, I don't think she knows what my political choice was. So I just said, no, because first of all, I don't have a lot of friends. And no, and they're definitely not in the church. So then she went on to tell me, she goes, I thought Melania was going to leave Trump after his first administration, but now I realize how much they adore each other and how much he truly loves her. And I was like, could I send you a link to a few, And then the next thing she said was, after he was almost shot, he found God. He is such a spiritual man. And I was like, oh my gosh, you are dumber than a box of rocks. But it brought me right back to that indoctrination, to the mindset, to the, like you were saying, the blinders where I will only watch and listen and read this material because those are only the authorized material that have been given. And it's like, again, going back to my opening clip from Thelma and Louise, I can't go back. I can't go back. I could never go back, So it totally just goes back to that. Where is your TikTok going right now? Because it is so fun to listen to and watch. So are you coming more forward? I mean, do you see it being more political, more church focused? Where do you see it going?
This has been such a problem for me to like try to put myself in a box. Like, what am I going to be interested in? What do I want to talk about? I know. Like, it's so hard. Pretty much my switch
because they don't understand ADHD. It's like, well, today, hello, I am focused on this. So that would be my whole.
Well, and it'll also be like, I could talk about ancient myth or whatever. Mormonism's still going to pop up. I could be talking about makeup, and Mormonism's going to come up. Like it's just ingrained in me, you know. So it just comes out all over the place. I really want to switch over to YouTube mostly because I just want long form content. Like I want to be able to give a voice for more people to talk about this stuff, because that's the hardest part of the faith crisis, is the lonely, silent, like mess that you're in, and just being able to be heard. That's all so many people want.
So true. And I don't know if Thrive, as much as they're trying to give people that have left the church a community, I don't know if that is really I think it is fabulous that it is a safe landing spot for a lot of people for a few years. But like you say, eventually you do have to join the real world. And so you can't jump from, I'm going to stay secluded in my Mormon world. Now I'm going to jump into my secluded ex-Mormon world, because I live in a community, even though I live in mini Arizona, because I live in, or mini Utah, because I live in Arizona, and there's churches on every corner, and Gilbert and Chandler, Arizona are little Provos. So, I mean, there's a huge Mormon influence here, you know, politically and everything. But I live in a community that I swear the entire state of Michigan is here. I don't know who's left in Michigan when it starts getting cold there, but it's very white, privileged, mostly 55 and above. It's not a restricted 55 and above, but that just seems to be who lives here. And so there's a lot of Christianity in this community. I mean, so I'm like, not only am I not Mormon, I'm not Christian anymore either. And so biblically, when I hear people say, well, we have the most fabulous couple that lived down the street from us, and unfortunately they decided to move back near their family in California. And so they put a post out and they said, oh, we thought we were going to stay, but it looks like we're moving back to California. And somebody responded by saying, well, God works in amazing ways. And I'm like, or they decided to move close to their family in California. I mean, there's that.
Yes.
So, I mean, this is where I'm dropping friends right and left, just with my, you know. So, and that's an issue. Where is your Christianity at this point? Or what have you, nothing?
I think Jesus was a real dude that lived and was cool and was actually like, I think that he was
like
saying absurd things. Yeah. But I mean, I think he was like going against the norms. And I think he was, you know, he was doing great things, but it wasn't like really churchy. Do you know what I mean? Like, he was just a great guy. And I think Jesus is cool, but I don't think he raised from the dead. I don't think that he was the son of God. It makes me so mad. And I actually get on people about on TikTok. I'll like be that weirdo in the comments when people are like, I'm a Christian and, you know, other good Christian. And I'm just like, that word makes me mad, because I don't think it has anything to do with Jesus. Like, it's just like virtue signaling, you know, like, and saying like, oh, and Christians, if you're Christian, these are the fruits of Christian. And I'm like, guess what? I'm not a Christian. And all those fruits are still there. Like, you know what I mean? I'm still getting inspired. I still do good things for people. It just makes me so mad, because it's just divisive. Like, it's basically saying we're better, they're bad. Like, you know, if you want to be in the good people club, then you're Christian. And it's gross. And I think it's weaponizing ugly. And I really don't like it. So there you go.
And you and I both, because I know one of your TikToks, you were talking about Britt Hartley, and I have downloaded her TikTok that she did about every single one of Buddha and Gandhi and Hindu and all of these different religions were all started by men who basically abandoned or abused their family. And I was like, yeah, that's why there is no, I don't know about Martin Luther. I don't know about his family. But it's like, because I was like you, I have some of the most beautiful Walter Rene pictures in my home that he has drawn of Jesus, because Walter is one of these artists who did not go with the white Swedish Sven Jesus. He did the more Hebrew Jesus. And so, and plus our youngest son had cerebral palsy. So I have this beautiful picture of the child being carried to Jesus that was dropped through the roof. It said, can you heal him? Because the child with palsy. I love that picture. I have the picture, and I think this one is actually a Lemon painting, which I don't really like her stuff, because Liz Lemon, because a lot of her stuff is very Mormon. They all have fabulous veneer white teeth. So, you know, I don't do a lot of that. But But I have another picture of Jesus as a child working in the woodworking, with his father.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff, But I can't let go of those because one of them is a woman touching the hem of Jesus. And I'm like, okay, this woman was a believer. I love her for that. I love the idea that your son has palsy, but can you fix him? I love that because that's human. That's what humans, please give me a God that can save me or whatnot, So anyway, well, Jenn, we need to get together because somehow we are sisters from a different mister. I don't know how this happened, but we have so much in common. We'll just take our ADHD selves to Sedona and have a great time. You need to come to Arizona.
Oh my gosh, I would love it. Yes.
So
I almost got to see
so
you
much.
one time. I know I'm going off, but just I went to Sunstown for the first time, not last year, but the year before. And I was so excited because I had heard you mention like that you were going to go. So I was looking, and I was so excited. I met other people. It was so awesome. It was my first time ever. And then Jean, Jean. I don't know his last name, but Jean. I met Jean and we were sitting and chatting and I was like, he mentioned you and he'd seen you. And I was like, oh, she's here? Oh, well, she's gone now. And I was so mad. I was like, I missed her. I was so upset. So anyway,
Well, hopefully
you.
they'll do, I know Sunstone last year was at University of Utah. It was just, bleh. I love it much better at the Expo in Sandy. So I'm hoping they move it back to, but anyway, I'll be there again. I'm going to miss the Thrive in St. George. I usually go to that, but I'm going to miss that this year because these darn concert people, they'll schedule a concert and then one of them gets sick and they cancel it and then they reschedule it and they happen to reschedule it that weekend, the same weekend as Thrive. We're going to go to Vegas and see a concert instead, which is probably better for my mental health anyway.
Sounds great. Yes.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Please, all of you. Oh, and one last thing, as Mormons know, explain why you chose the moniker "All Those Opposed" for your handle.
Oh, I should have probably looked it up more, but in sacrament meeting, we're supposed to have common consent. And so when they sustain someone or put someone in a level of authority or whatever, or even welcome new people to the ward, the first
like all those in favor
say aye, and we show it by the raise of the right hand, and then I thought they say all those opposed or any opposed or something. So that's my thing is I'm that person. I'm standing up opposed to all things gross.
And it's hilarious because again, the mindset, the indoctrination, we were all told that this is a democracy. And we've decided to put this person in. We're going to call them to be the new bishop of the ward. How many of you? Basically, they're saying how many of you will support him? All those in favor of John Smith being made the new bishop, raise your hand. Everybody raises their hand, and then they go any opposed, and then nobody raises their hand. But lately, because of Nemo the Mormon and some other fabulous people are actually standing and saying I oppose, and the church is like, oh yeah, no, you do not. No, you do not. If you have an issue, you go talk to your state president. Your state president will tell you.
To your local leader.
Yeah, your local people. And so it's a facade. Like everything else, it's a huge facade. So that's why I love it so much, because it just amplifies that. So anyway, well, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. And I'm sure we are going to talk again. And I think we might be collaborating on a few things. So that would be fabulous.
I would love it, love it, love it. Thanks so much for inviting me.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye. I try to warn you people about how great my guests are, and you don't believe me, right? Is she not fabulous? Please go to her TikTok, All Those Opposed, and just go through them, scroll down, catch up on some of her stuff. If you have questions about how some of the beliefs come to be, or how they're indoctrinated, or how they're practiced in the Mormon Church, she has a lot of insightful information on that. And so I really do think we are seriously, I'm sure I know there's a good 20-year difference between us, but I feel like we could just pick up tomorrow and be best friends for the rest of our lives, just because of everything and how we work our brains, our poor brains, and our poor families. Living with people with ADHD, but fortunately, I have 6 children. I think all of them have ADHD. My husband definitely has ADHD. So we are just one happy, crazy family. It's what made it all work. We're all just like, what are we doing today? No, good. Okay, yes. So it's worked out really well. So anyway, there's no normal thinking in our family, which has made it fabulous. But anyway, thanks for joining me today. Please like, subscribe. People, you do not, I know you hear this, but I follow some fabulous podcast leaders. The Diary of the CEO, I love Stephen. He is amazing. And he starts out every podcast by saying, 83% of you are watching, but you're not subscribing. We need you to subscribe for the algorithm to kick us out there into the universe so that more of our voices will be heard. And the more subscriptions we have, the more fabulous the guests are. And so if Stephen can say it, I can say it, but it's true. So if you're watching this, please subscribe. You don't have to watch if it's something you're not interested in, but you're still a subscriber. So whatever, it doesn't hurt. I'm not asking for money, and I'm just asking you to like and subscribe. So thanks for joining me today. We will see you again next week on She Became Visible. Goodbye.